Hi everyone, my name is Katie Roach and today we're going to be talking about fall gardening and season extension and ways you can extend the season of some of maybe your shorter crops, maybe not your indeterminate tomatoes that are pretty tall, but like maybe your eggplant and your peppers. And so we're going to be practicing using wire hoops, row cover, and something to hold the row cover down to create a low caterpillar tunnel for some of our lower crops. But we can also extend this caterpillar tunnel out if we want to phase in any fall crops like cauliflower, broccoli, lettuce, those sorts of things that we planted in the cool season. And so we're going to make this low tunnel a little bit larger so that way we could set up for success to protect some of our lower crops today. So we're kind of pretending like we are going to set up our season extension for peppers and eggplant. And this can be used in the fall, but it can also be used in the spring to protect your warm season crops from cooler nighttime temperatures or cooler temperatures in general. And it might help you get started a little bit earlier with some of your warm season crops in the spring. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set this down, but we're going to set up our wire hoops around our crops that we want to protect this winter. And we'll get those set up. This fabric here is the Agribon Ag 19 fabric, and it has frost protection down to 28 degrees, which is pretty good for this region in East Tennessee because our typical winter temperatures are around that same window. And it's a good idea to protect your crops if nighttime temperatures are getting kind of low, and also just in general to protect from wind abrasion and leaf desiccation from wind abrasion. And just any harsh weather events, if you see that there's like a snow or an ice coming up, it might be a good idea to cover your crops to give them a little bit of additional protection. So this can also be used if you have an insect mesh as well. So many of our lower crops might be targeted by cabbage moss or beetles of some sort. And so we can also use the same technique to set up row cover to protect against insects as well throughout the season. One thing to be cognizant of with this Ag 19 row cover is that it has 85% light transmission. And so when you're in the winter and daylight hours are significantly lower, you're going to want to uncover this during the day, let the soil heat up, let your crops get light, and then recover it again at night. So the main idea is that the sun is hitting the soil, it's heating this area up. You want to cover your crops sometime during the day in the late evening, afternoon, and then really capture that heat that the sun has been generously giving us. So that way in the nighttime, there's some of that heat still radiating underneath this row cover. So you're essentially creating your own microclimate for season extension. So first thing, we're going to set our first wire hoop. It's a little bit easier if you have all your crops in the same row. So we're hitting the edge of our bed like that. And then we'll continue to do the rest of the hoops and set those hoops up. Space these hoops pretty close together. If you're trying to cover a larger area, you can be a little bit more generous with your spacing and maybe giving them 2 to 3 feet of space in between when you're setting them up. But since we're only covering about half this garden bed, I've spaced these hoops a little bit closer together. Now, right now we've got our warm season crops in this garden bed, but say I were to plant some of my cooler season crops right here, I've already got my hoops set up to do that. So yeah, let's get into it. So this is that Ag 19. And one thing, the Ag 19 looks very similar sometimes to some of the insect meshes. So if I were you, I would go ahead and get a piece of red duct tape and put a piece on the corner of the Ag 19 so you know it's the heavier cloth that you're using. So this is pretty wide. And you can see kind of how it catches the wind nice, which we'll talk about. I also like to tie the back end of it together, just to make it a little bit easier to secure. So I'll tie this back corner together, drape that over my hoops, and then now I'm just going to work on covering the rest of the bed. This piece of row cover is significantly longer than our bed, which is fine. I would hesitate to cut the row cover in case I ever wanted to cover this entire bed, because it does reach the length of the entire bed. The shorter increments of row cover that you have, the less heat protection you're going to get. So you really want to make sure you've kind of got like a long area. And you're essentially creating your own little almost mini greenhouse by using this row cover. So after I've got it all laid out, I'm going to take something, a heavy piece of material, because if the wind catches this just in general or at night, it is going to blow away. So I want to make sure I'm securing the edges of my row cover. One piece down at the end here to help keep that in place. I've got the rest of my boards, I'm laying them down and helping to secure that row cover to the ground in case of any big wind events. Here is our final product. We've got our eggplant and peppers covered and potentially extra space for any other crops we might have. Say you're only planting half of this bed, the rest is warm season crops that'll be ready for takeout. Make sure over the fall and winter that you're not leaving your soil uncovered. So maybe put a good cover crop like a crimson clover, which fixes nitrogen in the ground for you and helps feed your plants in the future. Then you might choose to do that on the other parts of the bed that you're not working this fall and winter. These row covers do, if daytime temperatures are above 40, then you'd want to remove the row cover during the day and then recover at evening as those temperatures drop. So one last thing for ease of access with your row cover, you might, if you have some staples, you could staple one side and make it kind of like a permanent side and then have your boards be on the other side. When you're checking on your plants, like say you need to leave this down for 2 weeks, you can just really lift up the boards on one side and just kind of peek up under there. But kind of choose the side that's most convenient to you to put like more of a permanent structure in place, or you can also lift up all of the boards and just keep using boards, but you can use things like scrap lumber like this, or you can also use bricks or other heavy objects, sandbags, something that's kind of heavy that's going to help with the wind. So a lot of tools at your disposal. Use what you have. Thanks for tuning in. Here's how you set up a Caterpillar low tunnel.